So I want to welcome everyone to Inquiry today. To start off, let's sit for 15 minutes, and then after that we'll talk a little bit and take some questions. Okay. Yeah. Got to get the bell first. All right then. Good morning and, well, good morning here, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Welcome to Inquiry. Today, I would like to talk about a particular theme. It's running away. Running away. And running away, there's so many different manifestations of it. For us humans, it can be a physical leaving, as in separating from a marriage, leaving a marriage, or ending a relationship, or ending a job, running away. That's one option, is to run away from it. Also, running away can be something that's more of a maybe mental thing, in like when we shut down, when there's someone we're speaking with or we are with and we don't want to speak with. We don't really want to communicate with them for whatever reason, but certainly not in a real or intimate way. And so we run away from that in silence. It can look like avoidance when it's a situation where someone is changing the subject. Mail's here. Sometimes, although we may feel like running away, it is so terrifying to think that we might run away. We don't even want to contemplate it, so we'll hold back and not even want to think about it, which can be damaging as well. So how can we effectively deal with this impulse of running away, or blocking the running away if we want to do the opposite? So I'd like to resort to the most wonderful wordsmith there is, David Whyte, who has a piece on running away. And it comes from a book called Consolations, the Solace, Nourishment, and Underlying Meaning of Everyday Words. It's an older book. And he's so exquisite in his way of communicating. And all the details. So I'd like to share with you what he has to say. Run away is what most human beings would like to do a great deal of the time. It is the flight part of fight or flight that's deeply in our bodies and our past. It is our protection, an evolutionary momentum, and a biological memory deep in the human body that allowed our ancestors to survive to another day and bequeath to us, generations later, this day. To want to run away is an essence of being human. To want to run away is an essence of being human. It transforms any staying through the transfigurations of choice. To think about fleeing from circumstances, from a marriage, a relationship, or from work is part of the conversation itself. I just love that. So to think about fleeing from these things is a part of the conversation and helps us understand the true distilled nature of our reluctance. Strangely, we are perhaps most fully incarnated as humans when part of us does not want to be here or doesn't know how to be here. I really like this, the way he's describing this. It's very kind way of looking at this. Presence is only fully understood and realized through fully understanding our reluctance to show up. To understand the part of us that wants nothing to do with the full necessities of work, of relationship, of doing what is necessary. That is to learn humility, to cultivate self-compassion, and to sharpen that sense of humor essential to a merciful perspective of both a self and other. Wanting to run is necessary. Actual running can save our lives at crucial times, but it can also be extremely dangerous and unwise. Faster and more agile than we are, if we're dealing with animals that are bigger, faster, and more agile than we are, especially when the very act of running triggers an aggressive predatory response, or when running exiles us from the very circumstances that we're about to mature and cultivate our character. In the wild, the best response to dangerous circumstances is often not to run, but to assume a profoundly attentive identity, to pay attention to what seems to threaten, and in that intention, not to assume the identity of the victim. I read an article just recently precisely about this, about how this naturalist was talking about being on a trip, and all of a sudden they noted there was a bear in the region. There's a group of people, and there were actually some animals around as well. And the people were like, oh no, were very fearful and wanted to run away. And on the other hand, the animals, much smaller than the bear himself, didn't do that. They waited, they watched to see what the bear was up to. Is he just milling through? Is he just picking here and there? Or is he looking for something big to eat right now? And so they base their decision to run or not based on what the other animal, the threat was. Anyway, I just thought that was fascinating thing to notice. So in the wild, the best response to dangerous circumstances is often not to run, but to assume a profoundly attentive identity, to pay attention to what seems to threaten, and in that attention, not to assume the identity of a victim. With animals, if you act like a victim, you get small, well, human beings too, then that kind of causes somebody to attack you, or can cause you to, because you look weak. Through being equal to fierce circumstances, we make ourselves larger than the part of us that wants to flee, while not losing its protective understandings about when it might be appropriate. Besides, there is rarely one discrete identity who needs to run. We have many different constituencies, inside and out. We are not only protectors of a multi-layered self, but also of our family and community, of children, of those who are infirm or temporarily incapacitated, or who simply have the wrong perspective. We decide not to run not only because there are many who would be left behind, who cannot run as fast as we can, but also because in turning to the source of the fear, we have the possibility of finding a different way forward, a larger good through circumstances, rather than away from them in some supposedly safe area where threats no longer occur. We know intuitively that most of the time we should not run. we should stay and look for a different way forward, despite the evolutionary necessity. Rarely is it good to run, but we are wiser, more present, more mature, more understanding when we realize we can never flee from the need to run. So that's it. So I think this is a very interesting topic. Because it's very common, I think, human beings wanting to run. And sometimes we do it without deliberating and really understanding, why do we want to run? We just run, it's kind of a knee-jerk sort of thing. And if we can figure out about the fear, look at that fear and see what's really there. And then we can make a more measured decision about whether to run or not. And I think this is the part where he was talking about, we're making a decision not just for ourselves, but for others. It's kind of the non-self sort of perspective, that when we run, it has an impact. And what kind of impact do we want to have on others? That's just something to think about when we're thinking about this. And I think the bottom line for me is learning how to hold this uncomfortable feeling of wanting to get out of here, get out of the situation. How do we hold that? I think that's the hardest part, and not act at all until we really fully understand it. And I think that's a lot harder than just going into it or ignoring it. But it seems to be the wiser way to go. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I have to offer today. Oh, it's okay. I always think 1 o'clock is the end time, and then I just panic. Anyway, so I'm open to comments or questions that anyone would like to make about this. Maybe your experience with it, or whatever. Or if not this topic, then anything else that may be on your mind. Yeah.
No, so I'm just curious, because I'm curious about this in myself, and that is distinguishing between that fine line of, oh, I want to go to, and how much of that is running away from. Like, I travel a lot, and I love that, and I want to go too. And I think there's always an element of, however small, of getting away from, get a break from this, get a break from the heat, get a break from this, what seems mundane or monotonous scenery. And I don't know how to distinguish that.
So how do we distinguish when we're actually running away from something as opposed to just going away
to something?
Yeah, and that's a very subtle difference. And I think it's a matter of really sitting with it and trying to understand, let it permeate your body and just really listen to, am I thinking more about the fact I'm not going to have to deal with blah, blah, blah? Or am I just really anxious to discover something? Yeah. Because either way is legitimate. It just depends if you understand what's behind it. Is there a fear pushing you, or is something else just pulling? Hi, Emily.
There we go.
Here we go. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to see you too. And beautiful topic. Thank you for this. Really a very good reminder. And one of my reflections is, yes, there really are times, how I remove this, there we go. There really are times that we need to get away from something, that it really is best, but then also to recognize, is this the way I meet life frequently? Is
Mhm.
a pattern of fight or flight? And then to just really be with that, what really is best. And the other side of it, though, what I wrote down is that when we run, it has an uncomfortable effect on others. It affects other people. And do we want to have that effect on others? So that was the reflection that really stood out to me, um, of um, sometimes what feels easier is to just run. And sometimes that's the important thing to do. On the other hand, other times, it's really best to stay present and, um, uh, well, the other is a very disempowered response, versus an internally empowered decision to stay present
Exactly.
and work through the situation. So very beautiful, and really to consider, what effect does running have on others also?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, not just, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome. Hi there.
Hi. So it's a lovely talk, Laurie, and especially the kindness with which David Whyte spoke of accepting the the humanness of the desire to run away, and which, yeah, it takes a lot of I think patience and compassion with oneself. So my situation that this fits with is that I've found myself with some friends who are having some difficulty. One in a mental health way, and the other, which is strange for me because I'm a therapist, but the other one in aging and really, walking with a walker. This is someone that I met 20 years ago who was, you know, vigorous, and she just got older and with a lot of medical stuff. And um, she called in January, and yeah, I didn't return her call. And I'm
Mhm.
just, really been thinking about it. And thank you for this, for, you know, opening a space to think about that. What is it? What am I afraid of in these friends that are having such difficulties, and that, I there's a fear. There's some kind of fear of getting close to it, that I can maybe be without judgment. That's the hard part for me. If there was a question, that would be it. How do you do that? How do you, if you've participated in running away from something really, as Emily said, that gets in the way of relationships, how do you be with that without judgment? And with my one friend who I didn't call back for so long without guilt, and by the way, I did, and she didn't call back yet. So we don't know if that's the end of that, but just, yeah, to be without, to learn to somehow cultivate a space for it.
Yeah.
That would be my question, comment.
Yeah, and I think that's probably it's one of the hardest parts, really. It's changing of habit. Um, and I think I think we have to be very gentle with ourselves, very gentle. um, the self-compassion. You know, we do these things, maybe it's not the best thing that we could have done in the situation, but if we really understand what was our reluctance in not coming forward in that moment, just really look at that to understand it. You know, who or what part of you is scared, you know, and why is it? It's not just from that moment. There's something else that's in it, you know, and really take a look at what that is, and you know, be able to be compassionate and forgiving of ourselves for not being ready, you know, to deal with that.
It's funny, and thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a dream last night that, yeah, someone's knocking on the door, and I said, I'm not ready.
Interesting.
And then, and then they opened the door anyway. I said, don't you understand? You get the language. So that's such a coincidence, but thank you so much for your compassion and a beautiful talk, Laurie. Thank you.
I'd like to, now that I'm just thinking about it, give one example of a time. I've spent a lot of time running away from things. But early on in my meditation career here at Appamada, I came in and I was very excited about this new thing. And after I don't know how many months, I was very involved. I learned how to be timekeeper. And then all of a sudden, I disappeared. I left. And I didn't really know why. And after sitting with it for a while, I came back, of course, obviously. But the fear that I had with that was that I was afraid that I'd be stuck, somehow stuck in this community, and it would be a cult and I would never be able to get out. That was my fear. But it was, you know, for me, it was legitimate. So I had to be able to leave and go away. And then I remember having a practice discussion time with Flint. It was an inquiry a long time ago. And I said, well, I asked Flint directly. I said, well, if I go away, can I come back? That was the other part. I had to know both of those things before I could stay. So it's funny how we are. We have our things that we fear. Fear of going away and the fear of staying. Yes, Becky.
There's another aspect too that I've struggled with in my life, which is even though I want to flee, that I choose to stay and try to, you know, be with what's going on and respond to it or whatever. And this has been both personal relationships and work situations. And it's happened to me quite a bit. So what happens though is that I stay until it's like, you know, there is nothing going to move there. I've tried what I can. I've done it for, you know, from every direction I can think of. And eventually it's time to go, by which time I'm relieved, but also, well, I mean, I've even actually been kicked out. So, you know, so I think that that's another aspect of the choices we make is to be able to discern if there is, if both in terms of how I am and the context it's in, is this a worthy endeavor?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just wanted to add that factor to it because we hadn't really, like the things you were saying weren't as much about that. But I think that is one of the places where our animal brain doesn't have a place for that.
Mm.
And we need to find that elsewhere in our being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's certainly a strong desire for humans to be together, right? And leaving is a hard thing to do. Can be. And sometimes we stay too long. And yeah, and you're right, it's a matter of discernment. It's hard to know sometimes. But we do the best we can.
That's what we mainly do. It's the best.
That's the best we can do.
And that's one of the reasons that saying and with each other and ourselves to always remember the compassion, to always remember compassion.
Absolutely. Yeah, compassion for others and compassion for ourselves. Always, always. Yeah. It's hard to remember that, but
Yes,
it's
it
so
is.
important.
Really important. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Laurie.
You're welcome. Thank you, Becky. Francis.
Hi, Laurie. Am I unmuted? Yeah.
Yeah.
The phrase that keeps coming to my mind is wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, which is so simple, but so true. And I remember I was in in Al-Anon 12-step program. I was trying to decide about leaving a very long marriage. And I remember them saying, you know, stay until you're comfortable staying.
Ah.
And then decide if you want to leave or go. But unless you're in of course, a dangerous situation or abusive or something. But when you're just trying to work through some things, just stay until you get comfortable with staying, and then you're making that choice. But as you were talking, I had several things that just my mind was just jumping around. One, I have a new kitten, an accidental kitten. And I also have a dog who's still young and very energetic. And I'm watching that interaction of wanting the kitten to just be still. Because, yeah, the dog comes over and she's very interested. And I think it would work out better but then the kitten goes boing and then and so that was one thing that popped in my head. And then the other thing about running away, I live in a neighborhood, there's probably 100 houses out here. And so not huge. And there are two families who have just sold everything. One's moving to the Azores and one is moving to San Miguel, Mexico. They're just running away. They don't want to face, I don't know what, but anyway, those two things, strong reactions and emotions to our circumstances. And probably for me anyway, it always comes down to fear. Fear of what I'm going to lose, fear of not being kind to someone else, and leaving them at a time when they need something.
Yeah.
Always a good topic. I think most I don't, I'm not a therapist, but I think my observation is most women in my age group probably stay longer in situations than not, because we do feel a great sense of responsibility for others. And
Yeah, I think so too.
thank you.
Well, thank you. And, I do want to mention, I had a kitty and a dog at the same time. And they work it out so well. And
They do.
the years, they just were a comedy scene,
Mhm.
I just found this video that I did like 5 years ago, and it was of the kitty who was under the couch, and Ollie would walk by the cat, the dog, and then the cat was shooting its arms out and batting him and then going back under. So it's just really
Well,
fun.
it's been fun. I feel kind of awful admitting it, but I have 4 cats, and I just had one. And this friend of mine lives kind of out in the country, and she keeps rescuing these cats and talking me into taking these kittens, and they end up, she calls it fostering them. And the first 2 that I took are 2 years old. We're still fostering. She's still looking for foster parents. So now I have.
Good luck with that.
I know. I think this is home. But anyway, it's funny. I mean, we learn a lot from watching our animals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie.
Marla.
Hi, Laurie, thanks.
Hi there.
I was just thinking about popular culture, and I can only speak from the perspective of the US, but there are some phenomena that have cropped up in the last few years regarding communication and behaviors that are distressing, and I don't need to enumerate them, but in the last few years, of course, there are greater divisions, and one of the phenomena is this concept of estrangement in families and in friendships and kind of at a group level sometimes. And then and I don't think that that's new. I mean, I think that's been happening under the covers for forever, where people just, walk away from their family or whatever. And then there's this other concept that never had a name before, and that's when someone abruptly just completely cuts off contact with another person. It's usually a one-on-one thing, and it's called ghosting now, and has a name, a label. And so what I'm curious about is whether bringing these things out into the open and naming them and labeling them is positive or not. I mean, I think it's better to name things, even if the phenomena is increasing in frequency, which is probably not a good thing, and it's happening for terrible reasons. Being able to talk about it openly and name it so that everybody's really clear about what it means. I just think it's really interesting. It's not so much, sometimes it's running away, and sometimes it's, having a boundary or whatever. It's complicated.
Yeah. I'm not sure of your question. Talking about it with a strange person, is that what you mean? Or
No, I mean, as a society, being able
Right.
to label, and say, well, he ghosted her, and then there's an assumption that was hurtful. And whereas in the past, if that happened, it would be not labeled, and everybody wouldn't necessarily be clear about what had happened. And the same with estrangements.
Yeah.
The word estrangement is not a new word in our
Right.
lexicon, but talking openly about families that have splintered is something that to me seems like it's new. It always used to be a big secret and shameful.
Yeah.
It's still not necessarily positive, but it's happening a lot. And so my question is it better to talk about it? Is it better to have names for things or to keep them hidden?
Yeah, I think it's usually better to talk about things, about what's going on perhaps, but I know the ghosting thing, if I'm right, and I may be totally wrong about this, is kind of arose out of online communication. Is that right, or am I wrong about that?
Technology has definitely influenced it because now we as individuals have the ability to block people, and that means, cutting them off from social media and from email and texting and all that, kind of blocking their phone number. And of course, a few years ago or many years ago, that wasn't possible. So yeah, that's kind of a modern phenomenon.
I don't know. I think people did that beforehand, but I don't think it was quite as common, because if you got to face somebody face to face in the street is a lot different than being behind a computer, conversing or whatever. So I think, I don't know. I'm not a sociologist or whatever, but I suspect it's because of technology is so impersonal, really. I mean, it can be very connecting, like you're having right here. It can be very connecting, but it also can be very brutal. You don't know anybody. I read sometimes, very occasionally, not very often at all, stuff from my neighborhood, and I'm appalled by the things that people say to each other because they don't know each other. They're never going to meet. It's just something I'm going to think. So I think that's kind of a newer phenomenon in that respect, how it's delivered and how prevalent it is. I don't know what we're going to do about that. I don't know what's going to happen next. But I think always, all we can do really is pay attention to what we're doing,
Right.
in our sphere, and avoid that kind of behavior, and try to keep the communication. If you don't have communication, it's really a problem. And sometimes in the families that are split, you can still have communication, even if you don't agree on a big subject. You can still be civil, and you can still interact, I think. But that's on the individual level to kind of do that. So, thank you for your question. I think we can, unless there's any other comments or anything, we can go ahead and shift to doing, I forgot to do the beginning chant. I'm sorry about that, I forgot. But we can do our closing chant. And let's do the verse of the robe, I think. That would be nice. So, maybe ending a little early, that's 5 minutes. What? Okay. I've got company with here. It doesn't usually happen that way, but they were here and I'm here, so they're still here. We have Kim and Nelda here in the room. Okay. So, vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you coming, and see you the next time.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and thank you everybody for being here. If you'd like to offer Dana to Laurie or to Appamada in general, then please do go to appamada.org/contribute, and you'll find a place there to offer Dana. But thank you all so much. And if you'd like to join me for a further 30 minutes, please pop yourself into gallery view and I'll be with you in just a moment. Thank you all so much. Thank you.